Rebecca Friedrichs, great having you back on the show.
It's wonderful to be here, Josh.
Yeah, and it's been a while, too. We talked to you at your home, actually, last time about some of your work, and it seems now that a lot of what you were talking about, the changes that are needed for education in America, are kind of on the plate now. So I want to ask you some of your views on what's happening right now. One of the big discussions is whether or not Trump should eliminate the Department of Education. He's saying he might, but a lot of people would say, well, what's going to happen to education? Because technically the federal involvement in education comes from that. Yeah. Wouldn't Trump then be relinquishing his ability to impact education? What do you think is the right approach here?
Well, I think we need to look backward in America. So when America was founded, our founders made it very clear that they did not want the federal government involved in education. They did that in several ways. Number one, it's not in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say that feds should be running it. Number two, they didn't give federal funding to education in those days. In fact, the one thing they did was if you started a new town, they would give you a piece of land. But then you built the school, you hired the teachers, you picked the curriculum, the community ran the school. So the perfect way to get America back to where she needs to be is to get her schools back to where they used to be. And the best way to start doing that is to get rid of the National Department of Education. So just a little bit of history in case your listeners are unaware.
Yeah, be interested, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the National Department of Education never even existed until Jimmy Carter. So what happened was it was the National Education Association, the NEA, that really wanted to get control of our schools. In case people are unaware, the so-called teacher unions are communists.
And of course, a lot of your work has been around that, which I want to get into, but go ahead.
So these teacher unions wielded their power, and they were able to get this National Department of Education. The first president they ever got behind with full support was Jimmy Carter. His thank you gift to them was the National Department of Education, including a cabinet position. If you look at our scores and just everything about our educational system ever since that Department of Ed was founded, it's been done nothing but crumble. I mean, we're being destroyed. So our founders told us the only way you can keep a free republic is with a well-educated and moral citizenry that can self-govern. So what do these communists want to do? Destroy our morals, destroy our education, so they can control us. And you see that now with a lot of younger people are very controlled by, government. I mean, I still see people driving around by themselves in the car with wearing a mask.
Well, Rebecca, one thing people might say, though, is the Trump's talking about getting rid of the federal involvement kind of in the education system, and maybe giving vouchers to parents, maybe encouraging more community schools and so on, like actual community schools, not community schooling, which is a big difference, right?
Big difference.
Maybe we can explain that in a minute, too. But, the other issue, though, is the unions, and I know you've had some encounters with that. What would prevent the unions from just maintaining the same system even without it? Would that actually fix it, do you think?
Yeah, that's actually my biggest concern, Joshua. If I were queen of the world, I would make government unions illegal again. And I would start with the teachers' unions. Drag queen story hours at the libraries, unionized. So the unions are, if you connect the dots, they are the common denominator with all these agencies and institutions that are falling apart and that are actually corrupt and that are actually harming people. So I would make government unions illegal again and get the unions 100% out of our schools. I believe we could fix our schools overnight if the unions weren't there. Some proof of that. There's a lot of great charter schools out there. The great ones are not unionized.
Oh, really? That's right. The big difference.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, so I want to hear your story. We talked before about this a bit, but it's been a while now. What is it like really within the culture of these unions? Because I know that a lot of teachers are good people.
Yeah.
A lot of teachers, they're forced to join it. I don't think the average teacher is part of some radical agenda.
That's right.
But I understand that there are some real fundamental problems that come into play from within the culture of these things.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to us?
I can. The basics is it's brainwashing. I think Epoch Times people and readers would understand that better than anybody. So the I call them so-called teacher unions or the education cartel. That's my nickname for them. So they are expert brainwashers. I told you they're run by communists who are very good at propaganda. So teachers are fed constant propaganda, not only through the educational system. You're getting it now preschool through 12, through the university and everything, but then every day at work, they're propagandized. For instance, I've known so many teachers throughout my career that didn't believe in charter schools.
Yeah.
They didn't believe in private schools. Yet, more teachers than the average public are taking advantage of putting their kids in private schools. So when you ask them, what is it that you have against a charter school? Well, they've been brainwashed by the unions to believe that the teachers in charter schools have not been properly trained and that the kids aren't going to learn.
Yeah.
So really their heart is for the children. They've just been lied to and they're believing lies. The other thing that's going on with teachers is the reason I call the education cartel is they bully teachers and they control them with mafia or cartel tactics. So if you think about it, anybody who's working in a any kind of a job, if they're being bullied by their employer.
Well, I know you've experienced this firsthand. Could you tell us what your experience was with this?
Sure, I can tell. So let's see, which story should I tell?
Yeah.
I think I'll tell a story of a friend of mine. Two friends of mine, Barb and Cindy, worked in Washington. They started digging into how the unions were spending their money. I mean, after working all day, they'd go to the library, olden days, before these phones, and they'd look at microfiche and microfilm, whatever you call that, and they discovered that the unions were very corrupt and were spending their money on politics, which they weren't supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So they started to blow the whistle. Do you know what happened to these two sweet teachers? The NEA sued them.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the Washington Education Association under NEA sued them for daring to use the letters WEA that they said belonged to the union, whatever. The teachers won the lawsuit, but bottom line is they were terrified. When the lawsuit was first brought, they just thought, we're going to lose our homes. We're going to lose everything. Thank God a nonprofit came by and represented them. But that's what happens to teachers. I have some teacher friends who spoke out against the sex ed very early on, and they at NEA meetings, they just said, hey, we need something more balanced. We shouldn't be teaching the children pornography. They were literally spit upon by union leaders, booed off the platform, 10,000 people booing them, and then barred from committees so they couldn't have a voice. So this is how teachers are treated if they dare to speak out. When I spoke out at a staff meeting once, just because I wouldn't sign up to defeat school choice, I thought, I didn't have kids at the time, but I thought, when I have children, I want to be able to choose how they're educated. I don't want them to be forced into a government school. Well, because I wouldn't sign to defeat it and phone bank and go door to door, I was called in front of all my colleagues a radical right-winger.
Really?
Yeah, and then the union would not talk to me for the rest of the school year. They just shunned me. So then nobody else will talk to you because they're afraid to talk to you. So it's a culture of fear. It's your typical propaganda, right? People are just, if you go along with it, you're used as a pawn. If you don't go along with it, you're punished.
Jeez. Well, I know some people, when it comes, kind of switching back to the Department of Education, some people argue that if you got rid of the Department of Education, it'll upset the way the public schools are run. There's less money for schools. The quality of schooling will go down. Or some people say even school choice would create like inequality within the school system, where you'd have really bad schools and really good schools. What would you say to those arguments?
Wow. I would say those are all union talking points that they've put out there. They've propagandized people and made people afraid for no reason. So the truth is, if you look at America's schools before the unions got involved, unions were started in 1870, the NEA. Yeah. Before 1870, actually even in late 1800s, our schools were outstanding. Yeah. Over 90% of our public, the American public, could read and write, and they could write in cursive too, and they could comprehend.
I've read the curriculum for classic education. The reading lists are crazy.
Amazing.
It's like college level stuff. Beyond college level.
It's beyond the current college level. You would graduate 8th grade in those days and no more than a college graduate today. Yeah. So what I would say to people is, when you understand the history, nobody alive today has ever been in the amazing education that we had here in America. Well, maybe some kids from classical schools, some Hillsdale graduates, Barney charter schools. But and thankfully some more schools like that are starting to open. But people don't understand. They think education is what they experienced. No, that's not a very good education. We need to get back to a great education. What blocked our great education? The Department of Ed is part of it. Big part. Check that off. Easy to get rid of that, hopefully, under Trump. The unions. They're the biggest part of why our schools have been destroyed. So what I would say to people who are worried about that is, what's the proof that our schools have gotten any better since the Department of Ed opened? The proof's the exact opposite. They've gotten worse. And then the money part, they're afraid that we're going to lose money. Well, the problem right now is we're spending way too much money on education. It keeps going up, and the scores keep going down. We have 45 to 65 million functional illiterates in this country, in a first world country. That is totally unbelievable, and that's spending all that money. So charter schools in California get 75 cents on the dollar that a regular public school gets, but they're outperforming them. So it's not about money. It's about policy. It's about who's teaching your children. It's about getting special interest groups out of the schools and bringing our kids back to an educational environment where they can actually learn.
Right. Well, I guess just last question. If you were to tell Trump anything about the education system and what needs to be done, what would you tell him?
Wow. The number one thing I would tell him is that we can never fix America's schools until we get government unions out and all of their special interest groups, Planned Parenthood, ACLU, all of them need to go. So we need to return education back to the parents, the local community, not community schools. The local community.
Maybe we should talk about just briefly what community schools are, because this is a misconception too, because you think local school, that's different from community school, right?
Right. I'd say neighborhood schools. We need neighborhoods. One-room schoolhouses, homeschooling, right? A community school, as you know, is a communist model. It's a model where the school, the government, is going to supply everything for the child. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, medical, optical. Oh, by the way, we'll tell your parents how to vote, too. And the goal is to get the parents in to eat all their meals and just get the families totally dependent upon the government. And I'm glad you gave me the chance to talk about it, because a lot of people think, oh, community schools, how wonderful.
Well, isn't that what we want, right?
Yeah,
the communities will be involved again.
Exactly. And they think, oh, we need to help the poor kids. But what people need to realize is the unions and their system for decades now have used poor children as basically to manipulate us into doing things that are growing the government.
So from what I'm getting, your big point is it's a question of who actually raises the kids.
Yes.
Is it the unions and whatever, organizations, or is it the parents?
Exactly.
Is that what it comes down to?
That's exactly what it comes down to. We must empower parents again. If we send our kids to a government school run by communists, how are our kids going to turn out, right? And they're not going to be able to read and write. If we have control and our kids can learn to read and write and have morals and be respectful and honor their parents, I think that's what we all want.
Rebecca Friedrichs, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's good seeing you again.
Great seeing you too. Thank you.